This is like classic American haunting horror story because it is early 1900s. It's the South. It's an old wooden house, three women, an axe. And I'm going to bookend this episode because this all takes place in Savannah, Georgia, where I have spent some time and I have numerous firsthand accounts of my own sort of supernatural things that happened there. So there's going to be several ghost stories here. Underwear, alcohol, syphilis, murder, forbidden.
So I was just saying, I got a haircut.
A sassy new do. It's
Sassy.
fresh for this fresh new series that we're doing.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm very excited about it. And I just got a fresh used car delivered to me.
A
A
fresh
fresh
used
used car. Yeah, lots of new things going on. I think I need this hair for my convertible, it won't get messed up.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that's a good call.
yeah, exactly. So, how are you doing this evening?
Good. I'm recovering, or I should say recovered. I'm pretty well recovered by this point, but I was sick over the weekend.
Oh no, what did you have?
I think I had norovirus.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
It was messy.
Oh god, those are the worst. I've had a norovirus twice. I got one once when I went to Las Vegas for a convention, and my sister came out to see me. So I was working in Seattle, went to a convention in Las Vegas. She met me from New Jersey in Las Vegas. I got a norovirus on like a Friday night, and she got it like the next day. And it was the worst weekend. Like, whenever we left our hotel room, we were like, they need to light that hotel room on fire. Like, it was bad. It was really, really bad. I mean, we were in a sad state. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that this weekend, because I know exactly what that is like. And I've heard actually that that's going around right now,
Yeah.
noroviruses.
Since Sunday, I have not eaten very much. And I haven't eaten anything today except for a banana and a piece of cheese and this glass of red wine. So this should get fun real quick.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you feel well enough to have a glass of wine. I am having
Yeah.
a light beer myself this evening. So, yes,
Lovely.
yes.
Oh, Amanda, we have to be. Are you versatile? Can you be versatile? Right now, you're topping and I need you to bottom. There you
There we
go.
go. I like
Our,
this angle on me anyway.
I know our listeners won't understand what that means, but if you're watching this, you'll get it
Yes,
real quick.
yes. Well, I'm going to go ahead and welcome you to Forbidden, the podcast where we discuss the disgusting, the dark, and the disgraceful, and our unmentionables. That's right, we've slipped into something more comfortable. Hope you are doing the same, listener. Welcome. My name is Amanda Kamada.
And I'm Blake Roberts, and this is our limited series, Seance.
Seance.
We're stepping into the shadows to explore chilling tales of hauntings from around the world. Place your fingers on the planchette and let's dig into the paranormal with spine-tingling stories. So I'm excited for I know we've talked about this one for ages, Amanda. I think
We have.
since like the inception of our podcast, we've been talking about doing something that sort of leans into supernatural.
Yeah.
And we've dabbled here and there. There have been a couple of stories that have sort of broached it, but
Mm-hmm.
this is our dedicated series. Part one. I'm sure we'll be bringing this back at some point.
Of course.
But I have personal tales to tell, and I'll be sharing some of those today. And I believe you do as well. So
I do. I do. I've got a couple of doozies, and Yeah, I mean, this topic always just fascinates me because I completely believe in an afterlife. I believe in supernatural. I don't know what that afterlife looks like. Mine isn't based in religion by any means. I think that we've been very clear on where I stand on religion. And then I guess the whole thing is we just don't know what happens after we depart this earthly, place that we're inhabiting right now. So I completely believe that. There are ghosts. I believe that there are supernatural events. I've had them happen to me. I know like you said, you've had them happen yourself, and we're going to hear a little bit about that. So I feel like this is something we could probably have an 8-part series on, and that we will definitely, have more to come. But I'm excited that we're finally actually getting to it and committing to it.
Yeah, and it's different. It's just different from what we typically cover, which is like true crime or like real life stories, things that are easy to research and find facts on.
Mm,
This one it's based on stories. It's partially based on history, first first-hand accounts from people. So
yeah.
just
Which
take it.
could be true, could be hearsay, kind of
Yeah,
like the
there
Bible.
you go.
There you go.
Yeah. Um, today's today's will be interesting. This is like classic American haunting horror story because it is early 1900s. It's the South. It's an old wooden house, three women, an axe. And there's a lot of word of mouth, and I found conflicting points in my sources.
Mhm.
So I'll keep it general what I don't feel confident in. This all takes place in Savannah, Georgia, where I have spent some time, and I have numerous firsthand accounts of my own sort of supernatural things that happened there. So there's going to be several ghost stories here.
Can you tell, myself and the listeners how long that you actually lived in Savannah? How long
Yeah,
did you actually live there? I know
I
you've
lived
spent a
there.
lot of time there, but, you actually lived there.
Yeah, I lived there for 6 years.
Wow, okay.
I went to school there, and then after school, I stayed on for an additional period of time. And I lived all over downtown, well, and beyond downtown, honestly, at the beginning. But yeah, I had a lot of interesting sightings, and
You've been
things.
around the block there, I'm sure.
I have been around the block in Savannah. Caught all the best STDs there. Just kidding. I didn't do any of that. Um, no one wanted me back then. Okay, so my sources for today are an article. Well, I should say an original article from 1909 that I found on newspapers.com, an article from savannahnow.com from 2012, a website called georgiahauntedhouses.com, savannahghosttour.com, and then I didn't get a chance to listen to the full episode, but there is an interesting podcast called Savannah Underground Presents the Most Haunted City on Earth,
Oh,
which is what everyone refers to Savannah as, or at
I
least
had
the most
no
haunted city
idea.
in the US. Yeah,
Wow, okay.
and I fully believe that. So, a little bit of background on this story. Um, on December 9th or 10th, again, I found conflicting articles. It was early December 1909. A man was walking down Perry Street in downtown Savannah when he heard a faint groaning noise coming from inside an old wooden house. He attempted to open the front door, but it was blocked by a body laying on the other side. Maggie Hunter, 35, was found barely alive in a pool of blood with a crushed skull and a slit throat. The man who discovered her ran to a nearby drugstore where he alerted police of his discovery. Inside the house, police found the bodies of Carrie Olander, 36, whose head had been crushed and her throat slit as well, And then her mother, Eliza Gribble, some articles say she was 76, some say 70, was found in a back bedroom with her skull crushed.
Oh, this seems like a horrible way to go.
It does.
Yeah.
So Eliza had been reading a newspaper at the time, and her reading glasses were found on the ground nearby. So it kind of looked like she had been snuck up on. Um, a bloody axe was identified as the murder weapon, and the crime scene shocked the local community, with newspapers labeling it, quote, the most diabolical crime in the history of Savannah, end quote. So the Savannah Evening Press reported, quote, Gribble was stretched out on her back with her feet toward the door. Her face was as calm as if she was asleep, but the dark mass of clotted blood in her gray hair at the top and back of her head told the story only too well. She had evidently been reading when she was struck down by the murderer, as her glasses and a paper were placed at the foot of the bed by which she was found.
Oh my God, I just got chills.
Yeah, so this was a big case at the time. Uh,
Yeah,
it garnered national attention with sensationalized headlines blaming black men for the crime, of
of
course.
course.
Local police detained and investigated numerous suspects, and I found sources that said some basically between 100 and 150 black men were investigated or interrogated.
Oh
Which
my
is
God, that is a lot, and that is awful.
uh-huh. Despite using bloodhounds and a $1,000 reward, which in today's money would be just over $34,000, authorities struggle to find concrete evidence or identify a reliable suspect. But keep in mind, Maggie Hunter was found alive, terribly injured, but alive.
Okay.
So between the time that she was discovered and her death 3 days later in the hospital, she was able to speak a little bit. And what she told, I believe she told a priest who was visiting her in her state of mind, which was probably not totally coherent after being attacked with an axe.
Right.
She pointed at her husband, her estranged husband, which sounds more accurate, right?
Mhm.
Based on what we know.
Well, you're more than likely to be killed by someone you know than anyone, and that's a proven fact.
That is.
And
Uh,
particularly if they're an estranged husband.
yes. So her husband, J.C. Hunter, is also nearly 30 years her senior, which puts him around mid 60s.
Wow.
Um,
Daddy.
I know, right? And at that time in history, like people didn't live a whole lot longer than that.
No, he was no.
So he was
That's fucking old back then.
it is, and he lived some distance away from Savannah. So it sounds like she moved to Savannah and moved into this house with these two other women. Again, mother daughter. They had a room for rent, so they took her on as a boarder. She moved in the day before the murders,
Oh my gosh.
which
Okay.
also feels a little bit like
Mhm.
someone who this is targeting her.
Right.
Um, and if they're estranged or separating, it does feel likely that he would be prime for this. Other speculation about the motive for murder included robbery. Um, there was a valuable trunk which was owned by Gribble, and I don't know much about that. That's just like sort of like the bullet point that I found.
Mhm.
So I don't know if there was something valuable inside the trunk or if just the trunk itself was like
A Louis
fucking
Vuitton.
yes, made of gold. It's an early Louis Vuitton.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen early Louis Vuittons from I went to a, Louis Vuitton, like, pop-up thing where they had old trunks from, like, the 1800s and stuff like that, so maybe it was something like that.
Could have been.
Yeah.
So investigative methods of the era were rudimentary, as I'm sure you can imagine, with
Right.
police and civilians, which include press, by the way. When I say civilians, I mean it was press. The press had free reign, so they were walking freely through the crime scene. So I can only imagine what the crime scene looked like after people had passed through it, you know?
Yeah, that, and I'm also thinking about the gal who was, injured and who lived for 3 days, like how painful that must have been because they didn't have the type of technology and drugs and stuff like we do now. So I'm sure that was like a horrific death, like suffering before she died. Ugh.
Yeah, hopefully they just like pumped her full of like
Morphine.
or like opioids, like opium or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
um,
I'm guessing that's probably what they did back then.
yeah, I mean, I would take it.
Same.
Suspicion fell on J.C. Hunter after evidence contradicted his alibi, including blood-stained clothing found in his possession. Despite his denial, Hunter was arrested along with two other men, John Coker and William Walls, though evidence remained circumstantial. So in 1910, a grand jury indicted Hunter, Coker, and Walls. Hunter was convicted of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. However, his spiritual advisor, Reverend John S. Wilder, advocated for clemency, gathering over 300 signatures. Hunter's sentence was commuted to life in prison, and in 1923 he was pardoned due to his age.
Do we know what the relation was to the other gentlemen who were charged in this? Like, were they friends of his or acquaintances? Or, I mean, obviously not family because they had different names. Just curious. Or if it's just like, hey, I'm going to pay you to help me off these people.
So I don't know what the relationship was between the three men, but from what I could tell from sources was that it was eyewitness accounts from like neighbors and people like that. So one of the neighbors said that she had witnessed Coker there.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side of that same coin, it was neighbors that pointed toward it being a black man or black men. So, you know,
Right.
there's no real evidence there. So I couldn't find any sources that connected the three men by anything other than eyewitness accounts. There was at least one other confession after the fact. In 1917, a man named J.B. Garvin claimed responsibility for the murders, providing detailed knowledge of the crime scene. His confession was dismissed as the ramblings of an insane man. There's also a book, and I tried to get this book, but it's out of print, and the only copies I could find were like $65. And girl, I don't have that kind of cash.
No, not, not for this podcast. It makes us
Zeros of dollars.
zeros of dollars.
So anyway, what I could read though about the book was that the co-authors, last names Gordon and Smith, I can't remember the names. They researched the case extensively. They questioned Hunter's guilt. They did not think it was him. So I would like to read the book because I want to know why. Because when I can read, he seems like a very obvious suspect.
Yeah, particularly with the blood-stained clothing that was supposedly found.
Yeah, they suggested that the murders were likely the work of multiple perpetrators under the influence of drugs or alcohol, which again, I need to know a little bit more about that because that just seems less likely to me
Yeah, it seems a little
than someone who
far-fetched.
knows
Yeah,
one of the suspects.
yeah. I mean, that seems more likely to happen today than back
Right, like
then.
they had too many bath salts.
Right, right.
So they also believe that Garvin's confession could have been truthful. Anyway, the extreme violence and randomness of the crime left the case unresolved, basically, fueling speculation and ghost stories for decades, which leads us to the fun part. So I don't have any like super intense firsthand accounts of the hauntings, but there are a few things that are widely shared after the fact. So the Gribble house, which is what it was called, named after the elder woman in the home, was torn down in the 1940s, but up until then, there were reports of blood dripping from the walls from numerous people.
Was it ever inhabited again, or was it just abandoned after they passed away? Or, excuse me, were murdered?
I don't know if it was ever inhabited again.
Okay.
That I don't know.
I highly doubt it.
But the home was torn down, I believe, in 1941, and then in 1944, a warehouse was built in its place. A warehouse is still standing today, which sits directly across Perry Street from the Civic Center, which is sort of interesting because it's like a new, maybe like a late 60s, early 70s Civic Center, and then
Okay.
right across from it is an old brick warehouse. But there are still detailed reports about hauntings in and around the warehouse, including one person who worked at the Civic Center who, after leaving work late at night on multiple occasions, heard a woman's screams coming from across the street.
Oh my.
There are also stories in the warehouse because they do occasionally do ghost tours around that location. People who have taken tours have walked out of the structure with scratches and they don't know where they came from. A woman appeared in what many people believe to be a wedding dress. One of those lady in white type stories. We've all heard those.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a room that supposedly used to house slaves or be on the location of where slaves used to be housed. And that's reportedly where the most activity occurs. There have been reports of ghosts telling people to get out and people who have had their hair like touched while they were there on tours. It's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
This is the interesting thing about Savannah is that I don't feel like there are many places in Savannah where you can't encounter something like that. And this is where I'm going to pivot to some personal stories. One of which is, and I was actually going to do my first story on this structure, but it's the Pirate's House, which is one of the oldest structures that's still standing. There was a fire in the 1780s, I believe, that wiped out most of historic Savannah and had to be rebuilt. 1780s or 1880s? Damn it, I don't remember. Anyway, long time
A
ago.
long time ago.
Slightly before we were born.
Right.
The Pirate House was first opened in 1753 as an inn for seamen, and fast became a meeting point for pirates. So there's actually like a tunnel built under the structure, which is still there,
Oh wow.
where they would smuggle things and probably people. There's a lot of stories about hauntings in the Pirate House. This is what makes it difficult in Savannah, telling ghost stories about Savannah, is that ghost stories are such a part of Savannah that it's almost gotten to the point where a lot of them they feel sensationalized, or they feel like almost like just like brochure fodder. It's like tourist stories to get people to come and visit for that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little hard to distinguish what feels like fact and what feels like it's been embellished for the sake of tourism.
Right.
But the reason why I wanted to bring up Pirate House is because I went there with a friend for lunch, and this is maybe 2004, maybe 2005, maybe 2006, somewhere in that window of
The
time.
early aughts.
The early aughts. The way that, at least back then, I don't know what it looks like now because it's been 20 years, the house was structured like a house. So there were dining rooms, like large dining rooms and smaller dining rooms. And it was very much like chopped up that way. So the room that we were sat in, and this is lunchtime, it's daylight out, was, if I recall correctly, is in the back of the house. And on the way back, you had to pass the old tunnel, like the old well structure that was built. And you could view it. I think there was like a plexiglass cover that you could look into, but it was just like a dark hole in the ground. So we walked past that into this smaller dining area, and it was just the two of us in this room. On the outside of the room that we walked through to get into the dining room, sorry, this is a very convoluted way of getting to the point. There was a server station, and on the server station were menus stacked vertically, so not on top of one another, not on top of one another, but side by side, like on a bookshelf.
Right.
So while we're sitting there talking, I'm facing the server station, and my friend John, who's across the table from me, one of the menus flew across the room,
Oh my God.
launched
Just out
off
of nowhere.
out of nowhere, and it wasn't like it fell off. It didn't just like topple over. Because if that had happened, you just kind of like, all right, maybe someone just didn't place it on where it was
Right.
fully safe, like on the thing. That was not the case. It went across the room. And I remember my friend John stopped talking, and I told him what happened, and we looked, and it's sitting there on the floor. So that was super creepy.
Very. And the way, and if it was stacked like it's on a bookshelf, like there's a reason why things are stacked like that so they don't fall over, you know.
Exactly.
Like if it's stacked the other way, it's more likely to just fall over than to be launched out. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one. There's a few others I have from Savannah, and I'll touch on them quickly. Another quick one is I was walking through one of the old squares, and this was winter time, and I remember because there weren't tons of leaves on the trees. It was cold out, and there was no wind. And I remember seeing just like a vapor or like a mist floating in the tree, not moving, just floating there. And that could have been some sort of like a weird atmospheric thing for sure. But I've never seen anything like that before or since.
No.
So I don't know. It felt weird to me, and it felt worth mentioning. But probably the creepiest thing that I witnessed was at my ex's apartment. He lived there with his roommate who was out of town. So I'm spending the night in his bedroom, obviously. And since his roommate was out of town, my friend John, again, came to stay with us that weekend because I can't remember why. I'm sure he had some reason. It's 20 years ago. He had some reason why he needed to be out of his apartment, probably fumigating or something because there's cockroaches everywhere there. It's disgusting. But I digress. John is staying in the other. He was out partying that night. My ex and I stayed in. And so in the middle of the night, well, let me tell you what the room was like. It's like a shotgun style apartment, right? So front to back with rooms in between and a
Hmm.
long hallway that sort of not dissected, but just like ran along the length of all the rooms.
Hmm.
So the bedroom where we were was technically a fire hazard because there was no point of egress from that room, like no window to escape through, no exterior door.
Oh my God.
There were two interior doors from that bedroom. So along the hallway, there was a door, and then along the kitchen where it wrapped around, there was another door. Both of the doors were open that night. So it's just ambient light coming in. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I'm a very light sleeper. I always have been. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hall, and I open my eyes and I look at the hallway door, and I see a figure walk past the door. And it's dark, so it's all in shadow. Um, but what I could discern was a fedora style hat. The figure walked around past the kitchen door. So I saw it twice, and I just sort of didn't feel any sort of way about it. Like I wasn't really scared at that point. And I
Hmm.
tried to convince myself maybe it was John coming back from
I
the
was
war.
about to say, maybe you were kind of like, oh, that's probably John coming back from the club or something like that. But why would
Yeah.
he be wearing a fedora?
Well, but here's the other day. Again, remember, this is like the early to mid aughts, and trilbies, like the bucket hat that was hot earlier, had sort of transitioned into the trilby.
Hmm.
And a trilby is essentially a fedora with a much more narrow brim.
Hmm.
And I used to collect them, like designer trilbies, Prada, Gucci. I had a number of them. And so I thought, well, maybe for some reason he wanted to borrow a hat, which he had never done before. So I asked him, I was like the next day, John, when you came in, what time did you come in? And did you by chance borrow one of my hats? And he said he came in around 5 a.m. because he had hooked up with someone.
You're
So,
outed.
yeah, so he did the host role, the walk of shame. It's like, well, that's possible because it would still be dark out at 5 a.m., but he was not wearing a hat. And he also said he didn't go to the kitchen. He said he came in and passed out. So he went directly to the bedroom, which is at the front of the apartment, which would mean he did not pass the bedroom door, our bedroom door.
Right.
So that was the first part. A few nights later, again, memory does not serve me super well for this point of detail. In my memory, it was 3 nights later. John is gone. The roommate is back. And we were keeping the bedroom doors closed at this point because she has a cat, and that cat's all over the place and it makes noise at night. So we kept the bedroom doors closed. On this night, I woke up feeling that someone was watching me. There are no windows, all the doors are closed. I'm basically in a black box, but I swear to God, I could see a figure standing at the foot of the bed.
Oh my God.
And you could feel eyes watching you. And I was basically paralyzed. So this might have been like a sleep paralysis thing. It felt like a continuation from the previous night, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a figure standing at the foot of the bed, and I can feel them watching me, not my then boyfriend. Just I could feel it, like they were watching me.
Mm-hmm. A
And
man again?
that's what it felt like.
Uh-huh. Like that had a masculine energy.
Yeah. I couldn't, and which typically I would find very erotic. A strange man at the foot of my bed watching me, I'm totally into this.
Right.
But not on this occasion.
No.
I couldn't speak, and I was too scared. I couldn't make a noise, and I couldn't move. So I couldn't even reach over and like shake my boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
It was just paralyzed, and I just closed my eyes, and I did not open them again. And I basically like just laid there like that for hours. That is
very scary.
Yeah.
Did you ever have anything like that happen at the house after those 2 encounters, or no?
No, just those 2. And I've looked up reported hauntings at that location, and I couldn't find anything. But here's the thing about Savannah. Supposedly there's a curse on Savannah where if you die
Okay.
in Do
I
you
was
know
just
about
about
this?
to ask no, I was just about to ask, like, why Savannah is so haunted, so this might be the reason.
So, and I have no sources for this other than word of mouth and just from various people around Savannah.
Mhm.
If you die in Savannah, you stay in Savannah. So no heaven or hell, you're just trapped there. And supposedly it's like an old voodoo curse or something.
Mhm.
So, for whatever that's worth. But it does sort of it does sort of back up a story like this where there's even just like a passerby, like just a spirit passing through. That's
Mhm.
not necessarily tied to that specific location, but the greater Savannah location. So
Right, so it might not be that, that house was haunted per se, but it was just someone kind of passing.
Savannah's haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And there are other things that have happened there, but that I've experienced, but maybe I'll save those for like more minor things. But yeah, that's pretty much my Savannah experience, and I'll probably do more stories on Savannah because of that. There's some other like haunted tales to share, but I really wanted to touch on it's just like a classic, the 1909 axe murder
Right.
and contemporary hauntings.
Is the warehouse space, like, is it an actual warehouse, or has it been, like, converted into anything, like, super cool, like, loft apartments or anything like that?
I don't believe so. I think when I was there, it was used as a trolley house. Or at least I know that at some point in time it was used as a trolley house. I don't think it has.
Evolved
Yeah,
into, like, developed into something different. Although maybe no one would want to live there.
right. I
Yeah.
would. What does that say about me?
Yeah.
Um,
Clearly, your encounter with the ghost didn't scare you away from Savannah or living in haunted places.
no, show me more. And it's because I've always wanted to believe in ghost stories, but until I moved to Savannah, I never really did. I just wanted to. Sort of like Bigfoot or aliens. Like I want to believe in those things, but probably until I experience something firsthand or like see proof, I probably won't fully believe. But
Mhm.
I'm like glass is half full on those
Yeah,
things.
yeah. My, which I'll get into, I don't know how I'm going to tie it in, but I had never experienced any supernatural um, encounters until I moved to New York. But
Really?
also, yeah, but also New York. Now, my sister has in Arkansas, where I grew up, but I never did until I moved to New York, and I just think about how many people have died, and the city itself is so old, and the apartments that we lived in
Hmm.
were so old, like how many apartments in those apartment buildings that people had maybe died in, and that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting, like with you with Savannah, that's kind of like me with New York, which I'll get into like in a different episode. My encounter, because I had multiple encounters in New York, um, but and I haven't really had any encounters in Miami. I think Miami's too new, maybe. I don't know, or else I just don't live in the right place. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
I actually did just remember another one, Savannah, that I wanted to share. I'll share it real quick. A friend of mine, a girlfriend of mine, had a boyfriend who worked at an old bed and breakfast in Savannah. It was a beautiful historic townhouse. And she would go visit him, like if he worked late, like late shifts, she would go visit him, but she had to go through the service door, which was on the garden level in the back. Garden level is basically like a few steps down. It's not quite a basement, but it's not main level either. It's a little bit sub. It's a little bit submissive. So one night, and I want to say it was around New Year's, I went with her to hang out. So we I entered through the rear, always a good time. And it was two sets of glass doors, maybe French doors. Again, this is 20 years ago and I'm old. It's two sets of doors. So we go through, we're sitting out hanging out. We weren't drinking or anything because again, like it wasn't our property and he was working. So we were there
Mhm.
for maybe 30 or 45 minutes just chatting. While we're sitting there in like the kitchen area, the two doors both opened of their own accord and then they closed. And the way that they closed was the exterior door closed first
Oh,
and then
wow.
the interior door closed. And I remember that specifically because the three of us were trying to discount it, like, oh, that must have been the wind, sort of a thing.
Sure.
But if that were the case, if the exterior door had closed first, the interior door would not have closed
Right.
at all.
Right.
But that's not how it happened. And I also know that that specific bed and breakfast were very, and still are, they don't want the haunting to be a part of their guest experience. So I'm not going to mention the name here. I'll tell you offline.
Yeah. Tell me offline.
Um, but there was a story. There was also a photograph, and I could not find it. And she and this guy have long since split. And I doubt he would even have the photo now. But I remember seeing it back then. And there was a woman in like an old maid's uniform and like an apparition of her in one of the rooms.
Holy shit.
And there was a story where a ghost woke up a guest and said, told the guest she wasn't supposed to be there. To which the guest replied, I paid for this room. You're not supposed to be here.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I don't know if that's just like a Southern anecdote that,
Mhm.
evolved. The Southerners love to embellish their stories,
Oh, that's all they do.
but I always loved that. I just thought that was fun, but
That
yeah,
is fun.
so
Wow. What an
crazy.
interesting episode. Thank you for sharing all of that information. It
Yeah,
was
thanks
fun
for
stories.
yeah, fun and creepy, I hope.
Yeah, very creepy. I mean, I knew Savannah was seen as a haunted place. I know St. Augustine is as well. And I
Hmm.
think that those towns are, I call them towns. I don't know if they're considered towns or cities, but I guess they're cities, small cities.
Yeah,
Um, but when I went, I've never been to Savannah, but when I went to St. Augustine, people were saying it's kind of like Savannah. So I think that there's some haunting there, but I never knew that Savannah was so haunted, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see this like glaring light? I need to figure this out for next time.
Oh, yeah. Now I can.
I'm going into the light, Amanda.
Yeah, don't haunt me, or actually do haunt me.
Oh, I
Um,
totally would.
well, we can go ahead and I'll go ahead and give my hints for mine. I have 3 hints. They are superintendent, president, and horse for mine.
Superintendent, president, and horse.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And president of what? It could be a company, it could be the US, I don't know. But those are my hints for my upcoming story on the supernatural. um, I guess I can go ahead and tell everyone where they can continue listening and watching us. Listen on Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube, and watch us on YouTube as well at The Forbidden Pod. You can check us out on social. We are still on TikTok as long as it's around, Facebook and Instagram at The Forbidden Pod. We have our website that we're trying to keep updated, Amanda. It's www.theforbiddenpod.com. And send us your own supernatural or ghost stories, or send us your nudes. Send us like a nude where there's an apparition included in that as well.
How
And
many
that
times
is,
do we have to ask for nudes, Amanda?
yes, hello at theforbiddenpod.com. Blake, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this series.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. I'm excited for. I know what I'm gonna do for the last episode, my last episode, and then we'll have our talk of shame. It's gonna be a blast.
A blast. Yes, yes. And listeners, as always, we thank
Thank you.
you. You looked very ghosty there.
Perfect.
Spooky.